All right, hello everyone. Welcome back to the Gumtree of Liberty podcast. I'm your host Stuart. I'm joined today by Centrist, and our guest for the show is Rob McMullan, UAP candidate for Griffith in Queensland for the federal.
Hello. Sorry, I didn't hear your question.
My first question for you is, I guess, what made you want to run for politics at this election?
Yeah, your audio is not that great, so that's why I couldn't hear you. But if I'm good, I'll go for it. What made me want to run is I have recoiled in shock and horror at what the political class has done and how bad it's gotten. And so at some point you have to say, if you want it done properly, you have to do it yourself. That's really it in a nutshell. I think A, it can't get any worse than the monkeys that we have in there at the moment. B, I think I have a lot of skills and understanding and a lot to offer politics in Australia. And so, you know, I have a career that I'm also very, very happy with currently. Can't say I had a burning passion to be a politician, but I hate what they're doing and how bad they are more than I love what I already do.
So would majority of that be coming from the COVID response, since a lot of that obviously does stem to things, or is it more than just the COVID response in terms of politics?
I've been politically frustrated for about 10 years, and the COVID response just sent it over the cliff for me.
Yeah.
It's just absurd.
I think that's happened with a lot of people. It was like became apathetic to what was going on because they were so disenfranchised with what was happening, and then COVID hit and everyone was just like, holy crap.
It's really pulled the rug, not pulled the rug, it's lifted the lid on a viper's nest of political opportunism there, because what I think they've done is that they've gone, let's make a political calculation that we have enough people on our side to do this, even though the costs to these people are catastrophic, sometimes fatal, devastating to business, families, home ownership for some people. You know, what we've done is just gone, well, the majority, it's mob rule. It's just turned into a mob rule, and there's people who've been left on the outside to suffer horrible, horrible consequences. I'm talking about things like you couldn't get over the border to get your child some life-saving surgery, so sorry, your baby's dead. Okay, you can't voluntarily serve customers in your cafe who aren't vaccinated. Sorry, your business is bankrupt. I know people have lost their homes. I know people who have been forced into jabs to keep their jobs and have suffered multiple people, bad adverse reactions centered around their heart, and that's stuff you don't want to mess with. And so, you know, ideally what the government should be doing is facilitating cooperation despite people's differing incentives. But what they have done is gone, well, I'm a slimy career politician. I've got 75% of people on my side. Those 25% of people, who cares? And no matter what has happened to that 25% of people, I don't give a crap because I've got enough people to stay voted in. And that is disgusting abuse of people's rights. You know, what I've been saying to people on the campaign trail, and this is part of my philosophy, is when people are free, sovereign individual citizens, the only option left to you is cooperation. You know, we all want something out of other people. But if that other person over there has rights, I can't abuse them. I can't steal from them. I can't aggress against them. I can't berate them. I can't enforce any negative effect on them whatsoever because they have rights and they're free. The only way I can get what I want out of other people in society, the only option left to me is cooperation. Now, that cooperation is what creates wealth and prosperity. So when people are free, sovereign individuals, the only thing you can do is cooperate, and that creates wealth and prosperity. And they haven't done that. They've actually said, well, we have the political power to oppress certain people, and that is just a disgusting abuse of individual sovereignty. And if that keeps going, we're heading for a really dark place. And so I want to put my hand up to to have a much better political solution, have a much better government.
Yeah, that's that you're 100% correct. I think the government has definitely pulled showed their cards a little bit. With the UAP, we didn't mention this pre-show, but what is the UAP? Obviously, you know about the digital ID system that the government already has in place and that they're trying to push through more. Is that on the cards for the UAP to scrap completely, or are you looking to keep that in place? Or
no, absolutely. Craig's come out overtly talking about against it. The ads on TV that you would have seen are overtly against it. Everybody I know is not in favor of this digital ID. See, I think you could summarize a lot of the UAP policies as heading towards Australian sovereignty. You know, we have a lot of caretaking policies. We have a lot of capitalizing, market policies. We have a lot of policies to try to appeal to everybody in society. But one of the common themes is Australian sovereignty. Now, when they go for this digital ID thing, you're not going to get that. You're going to become more influenced by these global institutions and things like that. And the move is definitely going that way. A lot of people talk about these things openly, that they want more global organizations. They don't want national sovereignty. And a lot of the moves internationally, all countries have been away from international sovereignty. Now, once again, in the same way that when individuals are sovereign individuals, you have to cooperate with them, the same is true of countries. But if people have taken your national sovereignty away, they don't have to cooperate with you. They can force you. And so I don't want to see that happen. I think, I might have articulated that in a different way, but that's generally the vibe for everybody that I know in the UAP, is that we have policies to appeal to all categories of people in Australia. But one of the common themes is no digital ID, no international stuff. Australia should look after Australians. It should be a government of the people, from the people, for the people, and national sovereignty. No international digital ID stuff.
They currently have two parts of that digital ID set up already. So I don't know if you've seen the graph that was going around, but so the My Gov and My Health stuff. Is that something then you would be looking to strip back, or would you just be leaving those two things in place and just ensuring that we can't go to the digital IDs next step and the banking system next step?
I definitely would have to have a look at it myself. I'm pretty sure that on the other side of the aisle, I would get to look at a lot of the details. Look, on one hand, people will go for things because it makes systems more efficient, and that efficiency is going to make people. It's going to reduce the time, financial burdens on people, but even the cognitive burdens on people. People have limited brain resources, and so the more that you make these systems more complicated and spread out, the harder it is for people to deal with. And so once again, there is a demand from people to streamline services and put them all in one place and make them easier. However, like maybe logging onto your phone and checking your Medicare number or something like that, if there are safeguards in place, that's going to be convenient for people and they're going to want that. However, I shared a thing on Twitter just this morning, which was talking about, I think somewhere in Europe, that people's purchasing power was curbed because they'd reached a maximum number of carbon credits or something like that. Any of that stuff, no. Burn it with fire, take it out the back and shoot it. No, absolutely not.
Yeah, that's good.
What about the cashless welfare system for, say, pensioners and the like? Is that also being scrapped, or is that going to stay around?
I can't really give you any more than my personal opinion on this. So I always have to just be really careful. We have published policies, and that's the party. If I'm acting as a representative of the party, I can talk about the policies. I don't know that there's any policy on that currently, but I'm happy to give you my personal opinion of what would seem commonsensical to me. Generally, the purpose of the law is to stop you doing things to other people. It's one of the important jobs. And so this is a hard thing, because if you need to be on a welfare system, then your ability to support yourself is by definition not that high. Okay. And so if in getting resources from the government, you are spending them inappropriately, and that is causing an externality onto other people, I could see a rationale there for there being some management of what you do, because by definition, you've given up some sovereignty by being on welfare in the first place. And people really don't like to hear that. What people like is liberalism, which is I can do whatever I want, regardless of the costs and regardless of the fact that I haven't earned that. But once again, reciprocity, the scales of justice. If your ability to support your own life goes down, the cost that you're placing on other people goes up, and therefore in self-defense, they may need to limit what you do to them. Does that make sense?
Yes. I get that.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But, having said that, yeah, sure. But I mean, that's one scenario. But if you're not doing things to people, if you're not, getting your welfare check, spending it all on drugs, taking up resources, you know what I mean? If you're not doing that, then I think it's fine. People shouldn't, you should be able to earn the right to people not to intrude into your life as long as you're not doing things to them. And so, look, it's probably one of these things that's almost individual. It is an affront to your self-determination for people to tell you how to spend money. But if everything's all good, then you should have the freedom to do that. But you earn the freedom to be left alone as long as you're not doing things to other people. That's my opinion. It's not party policy. That's just my opinion and how I'd probably approach it. But unfortunately, your Greens and things, a lot of the left side of politics, they are not interested in sovereignty, which is where you earn the right to be left alone. They're interested in liberalism, which is I can do whatever I want and you have to cop it. And so they would say, well, that's intruding on their rights. And it's like, yeah, but you have to earn rights. We live in this time where people want rights but no responsibilities. And I would probably approach it from the position of that there has to be a justice scale between rights and responsibilities. And you have to have the minimum responsibility to not impose costs on your society. And if you are doing that, people will react out of self-defense to what you're doing. And hopefully that's not the case, and if you're just a completely functional person that needs a leg up, and great, leave them alone.
Now, you mentioned about the politicians basically, with their power grabs. Do you think that because they're the major parties, or do you like a minor party is immune from that, or do you think that minor parties could go the same way as the majors when it comes to political overreach and the like?
I think there is a tendency for everybody to have that lure, but the constant churning of things. Okay, let me put it another way. The fact that people can't conceptualize politics outside of generally Liberal and Labor is a subsidy. And that subsidy is lowering the demand for them to be accountable. Does that make sense? So, yes. And so with secondary parties, or, not Liberal Labor parties, and, not Greens, or National, with other parties, because we are gunning for that mainstream position, there's more of an incentive for us to really be accountable and not do anything dodgy. And I think that the people should use that incentive there, and given maybe another 50 years, maybe the UAP will be entrenched and there'll be someone else, coming in, a new competitor. But what I'm saying now is the fact that people can't, I'm not going to say they can't, I'm pretty sure they can, but, if it's the case that people can't conceptualize outside of Liberal and Labor, that is reducing the incentive for them to be accountable. It's giving them a subsidy. And I think that's one of the problems. It's there for everybody, but the more entrenched the parties get, the less incentive they have to be accountable.
And they're also moving the goalpost when it comes to new parties starting up. So it's okay for you guys with Clive, who's got a bit of money behind him, but a lot of the independent parties and smaller parties don't necessarily, with the rule changes, especially over the last 12 months, I think it was, where they've changed how many signatures you need to get and how many members you have to have, really do make it difficult for any sort of independent party to get in there and make a change. And that's deliberate by Labor and Liberal together. So
Absolutely.
you're exactly right that they're less accountable because they can just do whatever they want.
Exactly. And, we have, like the more you do politics, the more you get involved, the more you talk to people, the more you see the systems. There are political machines in place. You know what I mean? There are whole political machines and systems in place, and they put them there. And so they have built this fortress around their interests and their established political parties. And they know that. And so they work together a lot. We are moving more towards a uni party sort of thing, not in name, but in action for sure. And it should worry everybody. We definitely need more of an honest, open, transparent political system. And so I'm actually just very thankful that someone like Clive, who has the money to get that off the ground, is willing to do that. That's what it takes. You need people with money and power to actually have a conscience and say, well, this is what needs to be done. You need to shake up the system, because the more entrenched they get, the worse they're going to get.
Yeah.
One of the things I've heard...
Policy.
Sorry,
you go.
Basically, I was just going to tie into that with one of the things that I've heard from the UAP in terms of, and I was hoping you could clarify for us. Craig, I believe it was, and I think Clive have talked about minimising the impact of state governments and having a bigger federal government. Can you clarify that position for us on, and then how do we then, if you were to, for example, hypothetically take a majority and then get those things into place, those systems, how do you stop that sort of rise, like a rise in authoritarianism through that way?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. And I'm not sure to what degree I'd agree with that. I don't know that there's a specific policy that I can read out to you with the details fleshed out, and it's been interesting for me too, because in my ideal world, there would be a market of polities, an extension of the American program where you have different states, and if you don't like it, you can vote with your feet. And that way you have some kind of market competition between polities. And then once again, you create some incentive for them to be accountable to people. So that's definitely where I'm coming from ideologically. And so, but now we've had this collusion with the states all acting the same way. You've had, and especially you can still see that even though as corrupt as they are, you can still see the slight bent towards liberty from the Liberals, in that, Dom Perrottet has been quicker to open up than McGowan, Palaszczuk, and Andrews. So I still feel from my own observation that the Labor state premiers have been more brutal and more quick to lock down than the Liberal, even though it's pretty close. So yeah, it's been interesting for me to be in this situation of being like, well, the way that we actually stop these collusion of human rights abuses of the states is to get into federal and to outlaw it. So yeah, look, it's a slight contradiction there, and I'd have to see the details to see how I would vote. But ideally, I think that I think the federal government should be doing things like outlining a Bill of Rights, because once again, you have to have this baseline rights, freedom, sovereignty, and that should be common throughout the whole country. In a federation of states where, we do have national defense, we do have a baseline rule of law, but then below that, more of the details, more of the undecidable political solutions can be decided in a market where people vote with their feet between states, or even smaller. So look, once again, it has to be a balance. if you'd have said to me 2 years ago that I'd be advocating for the states to crack down, so the federal to crack down on states, I'd say, well, that's not my value of markets of polities, but it's just been necessitated because they're all acting the same way anyway. And what they're doing is just egregious. So it's one of these things. I'd have to see the details. I'd really have to see the details. But just to give you, that's my values that I'm coming from, is that I do think there needs to be some sort of market of polities. And I don't think, you said the word authoritarianism. Well, if it's an authoritarianism of individual sovereignty and rights, I'm happy for the federal government to do that sort of authoritarianism. You must have rights. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's fair. So flowing onto that then, obviously because of different policies and stuff, does Clive and the UAP allow, I'll rephrase this. One of the issues you find with the Labor and Liberal stuff is everyone has to sort of fall in line with the party, right? So it's the party above the people they're supposed to be representing a lot of the time in politics at the moment. Which you see with that, what happened in Victoria when as soon as one person came out against, I think it was Dan Andrews, then she was kicked out and, ostracized. Does Clive and Craig give you guys the ability to speak and vote and disagree with the party, if that makes sense? So if the party has one stance, are you able to push back on that party without fear of repercussion, etc.?
So far, absolutely.
You mean like conscience votes?
So far, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I haven't made any votes because I'm not in yet.
No.
but so far, yeah, absolutely. I was talking to an ex-Liberal candidate the other day, and he just cancelled running because, once again, Liberal Labor, they're political machines. Sign here on the dotted line, do this, do that. There was another lady who I think is actually a great candidate, and she got booted from One Nation for defending herself. I'm sure you'd know about that.
No,
yeah,
no.
So she was running as a One Nation candidate, and a Greens councillor started spreading lies about her, who basically said the AEC was investigating her. And she made a video saying this is absolutely false and I want a retraction and an apology. And then I don't know why. I think a lot of the political parties, their opinion to any sort of controversy is just ignore it, don't feed it, go away. And once again, that's an incentive that suits the party, but they don't care if it's actually having a cost on the individual. So they're kind of like, well, you just cop it, but it's good for the party now branding for you to cop it and not respond. But she wanted to respond, and so she got booted. I haven't had anything like that at all from UAP. There's been some instances where some candidates went to speak at a church about abortion, which is a very hot topic, and the messaging from the party was like, look, we have policy, recite the policies, and beyond that, give your opinion. That's your opinion. Just to delineate between, well, this is my personal opinion, and that's not party policy necessarily, because that's worked out. You know what I mean? In terms of voting, I haven't signed anything that said I have to vote a certain way at all. I have no agreements like that whatsoever. There's a culture of people, which is, probably, conservative libertarian. People believe in freedom, but, conservative productive values. There's a certain culture. We all get along really well, but I haven't had any direction. I haven't signed anything that says you have to vote this certain way at all.
I think
I'm not surprised to see One Nation candidates being kicked from the party, considering Pauline Hanson has a history of kicking out people who she doesn't like, who disagree with her.
Yeah, well,
a tyrant when it comes to that. So many deputies and stuff have been kicked from the party because she doesn't like them anymore. They disagree.
I'm really, really happy that UAP picked me up because, we've had Zooms with Clive, all the state directors, and everybody's been really great, really above board. There's been no dodginess, no bitchiness, absolutely nothing. We can ask Clive freely, what do you think about this? We have chats. How should we approach this in our things? He just gives honest advice. Haven't had any dramas like that at all. It's really good. It feels honest. And, and that's the thing I really hate is this silly politicking, because, my genuine, honest to God opinion is that we have some pretty large civilizational problems, and people are bickering as they go over the cliff, and I hate to see it. Even with Pauline, generally, I think Malcolm Roberts is a really great figure. He says a lot of great stuff, and I agree with a lot of what Pauline said as well. But just this bickering and the party politics and just anything that resorts to these political machines, I just find it so on the nose. And if the UAP was like that, I would have struggled to stay there.
No, and this is, you don't answer the question if you don't want to, but I remember seeing that photo going around of, was it Malcolm Roberts with Clive and Craig? And I believe there was some people in the UAP and One Nation didn't feel happy about them working together. What are your thoughts on that, working with, say, One Nation, for example, or the Lib Dems as right-wing minor parties?
Yeah, I want to be friendly with anybody who helps me fix the problems we have. That's my honest to God opinion. Like I said, I have a life that I'm extremely happy with. I'm not here to be somebody. I'm not here to be cool. I'm not here to earn any more money. We have problems, and our political class are corrupt, entrenched, incompetent. I'm not going to say they're stupid. I think they're probably just corrupt. They seem, like intelligent people who are using that for their own ends at a lot of other people's expense. That's my honest opinion. And I'm happy to be friendly to anybody who is going to help us sort out the problems that we have as a country. And, our institutions are broken. People's relationships are getting worse. Animosity between citizens is getting worse. Relationships with families are getting worse. The country's more in debt. We're not manufacturing anything here. You know what I mean? Like, I could go on and on about the problems that we have, which are all a breakdown of our structures of cultural production and our institutions. These are the things I care about. I don't even care about Clive or who he is. Like, not really nice guy. He's been super lovely to me. But I don't care about Pauline. Just stop flinging crap and just fix the problems. That's all I want.
Bit of maturity would be nice.
Yeah, I like that approach. But when it comes to that, I guess, so at the last election in Griffith, the Liberals got, I think, 40%, but then Labor at 30% and Greens at 23%. So is there a risk that you'll have
I'm pretty sure 2019 it was 42% Liberal from memory, 32% Labor and 19% Green. And then when the Greens preferences went to Liberal, it tipped them over to 51%. Is that about correct?
So
I don't know if you're looking at it.
The Greens preference, Liberal, you're saying, over Labor?
No, Labor. Liberal 42%, Labor 32%, Green 19%. So 32 plus 19 tipped them over to 51%.
Yeah. Do you think in that case that having I think Lib Dems are running in Griffith as well. So do you think that having the three right-wing minors there? Okay.
No.
Good.
There's,
so I was going to say
there's
having all
Liberal,
three
Labor,
run
Green.
split the vote.
There is no splitting the vote. Just preference in order how you want. Because when a candidate gets eliminated, the votes will go to your next preference anyway. So don't be afraid of voting minor parties. That's the way it works. I did a video on all my socials where I had to fill out a pretend ballot from the AEC. You have to number every box for the House of Representatives ballot to count. The only exception is if you leave one box unnumbered, they assume that is your last preference. That is the only exception. Yeah. But apart from that, you have to fill out every ballot. So the way it works is if you want, there's 5 of us in Griffith. There's myself, One Nation, Liberal, Labor, Green. And if that's the order that you want, if you vote me first, which you obviously should, of course, then One Nation second, you're not splitting the vote between me and One Nation because as soon as one of us gets eliminated, it goes to the other and gets counted. So there's no splitting votes. Just put them in the order that you like, people, and it all works out.
We
And
touch base. Oh, sorry.
I'll just say too, there's so much misinformation that goes around. And I did another video and I said, they love to double down on their dirty little lies. And that was that, a vote for UAP is a vote for the Liberals. And that's because, and when I pressed one of these people who was saying this, they said, yeah, well, after the 5th round, my vote went to the Liberals. I'm like, yes, of course, you idiot, because if there's only 6 people, it's going to get down to the last 2 at some point. So that's a lie too. It'll go to the parties in the order that you set them. And if you don't,
we did a show just yesterday one of the myths is the party controls where the preferences go to, and that's just stupid. The only time that applies in any way would be, I guess, voting above the line in the Senate, where you have the parties will have their list of Senate candidates. But that's the only time that the party has any control over where your votes go. It's all up to the voter. I
wonder, because I wouldn't have probably paid much attention to this, in years past, and maybe it was different in the past, and some other people are confused. But all I can say now is, if you want it straight from the horse's mouth, go to the AEC website and fill out a sample ballot in both. You'll see how it works. And if you haven't done it properly, it'll give you a red cross saying, sorry, do it again.
They've been super active on Twitter as well. So if you're on Twitter, you can follow their Twitter account. They've been in overdrive over the last few months.
But there's no splitting the vote.
Going back to Griffith, before the show, you talked about one of the, I don't want to say disaffected Liberal, but the Greens voters who aren't so keen on the Greens. With this election in your area, do you think that you can poach, because obviously to get in, you're going to need to poach votes from both sides of the aisle. Do you think there's enough movement there in, say, what would typically be the Greens base in order to get you into power?
I honestly can't tell you what's going to happen. I think this election is such a wild card. Everybody's feeling a lot of a huge mix, no matter what party you're in. Like, some people are really apathetic, some people are nihilistic, some people are changing, some people are super motivated. It's just all over the shop. I couldn't tell you what's going to happen, but I can tell you I've had a lot of Greens voters come up to me when we're on the street and say, thank you very much. I don't want to be forced and financially coerced into getting injected whenever the government decides I should. This is just such an egregious violation of bodily autonomy. Thank you very much for doing what you're doing. I never thought I'd be sided with Clive Palmer, but here we are. Let's do it. And what I'm really happy about too is, I did another radio show. We talked about a political framework, a triangle, say, I'll have to do it differently. I'm going to reverse because I'm on a camera. So left wing caretaking, right wing capitalizing, the cooperation between the two creating, well, I'd say evolutionary computation, but wealth and prosperity upwards. So a triangle, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Left wing caretaking, right wing capitalizing, and then going up. And so this cooperation, this reciprocity between different people's intuitions is important. And so what I like on the level of policy with UAP is we have a lot of caretaking policies to help out. I really hope that does help out and convince some Greens and Labor voters. We have a policy saying that university and TAFE should be, as it used to be, free. I have my own caveats with that, and I would have to say that I would vote to say that entry should be stringent. Entry requirements should be as they used to be and completely free of ideology. Now, if you do that, you're not actually just giving people a whole bunch of money to get degrees they don't need. I think for me, that would be a big problem. It's a form of baiting people into hazard. However, if you have completely stringent entry requirements and people are going to university who really, it's going to be more profitable for society to be there. There might be some people who can't afford to go to university, but they do have the talent, work ethic, the intelligence, etc., to get a high level education and then contribute that to society for the rest of their life. It's going to make society wealthy. So for me, the caveat is to be legit about who you're letting in. But if you do that, there are a lot, that is a big caretaking responsibility, which will help out a lot of young people, help them get established with a free education so that they can set themselves up in life. Another one I really, really like is that a policy for the first $30,000 of your mortgage repayments every year to be tax deductible. Obviously, housing is so expensive for people. I think that's a great tax break. And unlike the Greens, the way we propose to pay all this is by getting the national debt down with a 15% export license on our iron ore. So the way that's set up is that the Australian iron ore supplies, I think, 75-80% of the Asian manufacturing market. They need it. They need our iron ore. Our political class is giving it away too cheap. They could get it other places, but the supply chains, to set up a supply chain itself is so prohibitively expensive, it's going to be cheaper for them to pay the 15% extra than to set up new supply chains to get it from Africa or anywhere else. You know what I mean? So it's basically stitched up, and it's moving into a third way mixed economy kind of thing where we are a resource rich country, but we're using that to make the country better as a whole, more like Norway. Norway's oil rich, and they have a lot of caretaking policies which capture a lot of the left wing sort of people. And it's not unlike the Greens who say, well, let's just tax the productive, let's just tax the billionaires, and then have the tax sort of filter down, which is what will happen. We're using our resources to create that wealth, get the debt down, and then help out average Australians as well. So I really like that. It's very much a centrist party policy suite. Sorry, I can't remember what your original question was. I went on a tangent. But once again, that whole cooperation, a lot of your libertarians might not like it, but that's kind of what needs to happen.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan on the abolishing the student debt and the free education thing. I'm not. My concerns with that is that because the system can then so easily be rigged to favour certain demographics, I quite like our HECS debt system that's set up where you have you get an interest-free loan and then you have to pay it back provided you're earning over 40,000. So the people, I think that system works quite well because what it is then you're giving your I also think it's more of a centrist point of view because it's giving everyone access to the education on a guaranteed loan from so we're investing in those people and they're just paying it back when they can. So it's not a given that you're getting it for free, but you are getting access to it without having the stress of having interest loan and all that sort of stuff on it. So I personally like our HECS debt system that we've got. I do agree we probably need to change how people get into uni. I think too many people are going in, but I think that's also because we talk down trades in this country and apprenticeships. And I think when I was going through school, I went and did chemistry at university, but during school it was the dumb. Hopefully none of my old mates are watching, but it was the dumb kids that got pushed to the trades, like the guys who didn't fit in with school or the system wasn't for them, so they were put into trades. And ironically, they're the ones who are doing probably better at the moment than most of the other people because the systems, I think the apprenticeship and the traineeship systems can be quite beneficial. We should be using that more often, I think, and talking it up rather than talking it down and pushing everyone to uni.
I completely agree. And there has been this, academics have positioned themselves as high status compared to trades. And I don't think that's defendable at all. There's, that meme of, I've got $100,000 student debt for postmodernist, feminist intersectional studies or whatever, and I'm a barista, whereas old mate who is a Sparky is, earning $100,000 a year, no debt, it completely makes sense, So the policy, I think, I'd have to have a lot of caveats for that, and I don't think that's a centrist policy itself. I mean, the whole suite of policies for the UAP is positioning themselves as centrist because there are a lot of economic policies as well. It's just trying to capture a lot of people and give something to help out all sorts of people. The whole policy suite to me looks centrist, but I don't think that's a centrist policy, no. And I would have to put some caveats on it. But the other thing too, I think you have to steer away from baiting people into hazard. And once again, so this system of status where people who do look down on trades and they feel like academics and getting a master's and a PhD is high status. So you're actually encouraging people to go into these things with that status hierarchy. That, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's making people want to go to university because they feel like they're going to be smarter.
Or that you're a failure if you don't. Like that
exactly.
was a very big push.
Yeah.
It's a psychological push on people, and that's not to say that university isn't a great thing and the education is good to have, but I think we've put too much emphasis on it with the principle that you've got to go from high school to uni, get the degree, then go to work, rather than go work, then go to uni and then come back. Yeah.
Look, it's a great thing to have if you need it, if it makes sense, and one of the things too, there is, like I said, baiting people into hazard, getting degrees they don't need. And there's also the opportunity costs of going to university. We have a housing crisis and, people say, well, young people can't get into homes because they buy too much smashed over or all this nonsense, But imagine if, it takes 3 years to get a degree, just to base, not talking about masters or PhD or any of these things, 3 years to get a degree. Well, what if instead of going to university, you stayed with your parents and you worked as a barista or whatever job you wanted to get? You'd probably save 20, 30 grand a year. If you can just go get an average job that's earning you $800 or $900 a year, pay your parents some board, and then over 3 years, you could possibly come out with $100,000 for a house deposit. Your life is going to be better if you do that than go get a degree that you don't need. And so, that once again, that push, I'd say it's seen as a status thing, the same thing as you said, it's a push to go to university or that you're a failure if you don't. That needs to change. But it's also like a cultural issue. And like I said right at the start, we have lost control of the institutions of cultural production, the ways that people get trained and our cultural ideas. We've kind of lost control of those. I'm not sure that's necessarily a political solution, but that's definitely a cultural shift that would need to happen. There needs to be that respect for just getting a trade and earning good money in a trade. It's no different. And they often earn more money than a lot of academics. So I don't know where they get this high status thing from, but that, So even that policy, I would put a lot of caveats in there. If I had that bill, I would put a lot of these caveats in there to make sure it's not baiting people into hazard as well. But it is once again a caretaking policy. I think a lot of Greens and Labor supporters will go for, and so I think that's important because that was the original question: how are we going to capture a lot of those voters with policies like that, where we are going to help out people to get established in life? But I would just make sure that it's long-term profitable, and you do that by making sure that the people who get degrees are the ones who are actually going to use them and need them.
Do you support in any way bringing back like the free tradeships and apprenticeships then that Labor brought in? Would that be on the table then to help try and promote people going in the trades instead of going to university?
Yeah, absolutely. That was a conversation I had with Gerrie from Lilley, is that it needs to go hand in hand with encouraging people instead of to go to university where they should actually go into a trade or an apprenticeship. Absolutely. And I don't think it's fair to say that university and TAFE should be free and then not have the same thing for trades, because, and I'm almost anti this status thing that academics have going on. I'm pretty academic myself, but it's like, I can tell you a lot of the trades are a lot more useful to society than a lot of the academics. And, sorry, Greens. No, I definitely would support that. Yeah, I think having that respect and dignity and honor of just getting out there and learning a great trade, like it's a great thing for society. And I completely reject any idea whatsoever that you're any less valuable or worthy of respect if you don't go to university. I think it's absurd.
Yeah, that's definitely crept into society, though. As you said, it's a societal issue. There's definitely an elitism that comes from university. What was I going to say?
And it's coming that way because we funnel so many people there, and we're going to stop doing that by actually having stringent entry requirements.
Yeah, I'd like to say also, I'm not sure whether that is even possible with the government having the input, but allowing certain industries to have apprenticeships rather than needing the degrees. So back in the day, for example, in the mining, a guy doing exploration didn't need to have a geology degree. Like, you can just go out and do it and be trained up by the company and do really well. I think we should probably look, like, you could still do some courses with it, but I think running an apprenticeship in certain degrees of those sort of things should be beneficial as well, rather than having someone go do 3 years of uni before.
Yeah, you're right. I'm not sure what could be done legally, but I can just speak from my values. I completely understand that. I went to university on the Gold Coast and did a music degree. Now, back in the day, there used to be a lot of recording studios. And I can tell you now, you can read as many papers on how to record an album or to how to play guitar as you want, but you'll never get it. What you actually need to do is, if you want to learn how to work in a recording studio, you need to go work in a recording studio as an apprentice. And so, but what happened is that the university got so much funding that they had just millions and millions and millions of dollars invested in state-of-the-art recording studios given to students who didn't know what they were doing with it. And because they didn't know what they were doing with it, they didn't really produce that much great content. I mean, there's a bit, I'm not going to completely talk it down, but you can't just give the greatest tools in the world to students and expect them to come out with a world-class product. And actually more product comes out of people with less tools who run their own studios. And so, but the point is, because the university got so much funding, what it did is actually put all the other studios out of business, because everybody knew someone in the course who could get into the studios for free or for a project. But it also is this spiral to nowhere, because not only was everyone going in for free university-based recordings, they're also often, it's more the exception than the rule that they're any good. Whereas a lot of people in studios outside the university system were producing commercially viable music and albums for people, even with less gear, but people get seduced in with the funding and the big studios and the state-of-the-art equipment and that sort of things. So yeah, absolutely. A lot of these things, and once again, it has to be a shift in how people perceive it and what they perceive to be high status. You know, if you wanted to work in a recording studio, you should go be a coffee boy in a studio. You will do better than going and reading a book about it, or, you know, even, you just need that hands-on experience, you know, and you're getting one recording studio with one lecturer telling you the theory about how it works, split between 30, 40 different people. Whereas if you go and be the coffee boy in a studio, you've got your hands on in there, you're the one apprentice. So it's actually more one-on-one. You're going to have more time doing what you actually want to do. And then you're going to learn by doing a lot better. And I think, you know, same we said, it just needs to, people need to rethink about training, and we need to stop this useless academizing everything.
Speaking of old policies, then, back in 2014, I think it was the UAP, or I guess the PUP before the UAP, attempted to ban 3D printing firearms in Queensland. Has that changed at all? The stance on guns, whether it be just you or whether it be party policy that stands towards gun rights?
I think there's no policy about gun rights whatsoever that I'm aware of at the moment. I'm not aware of any policy currently about it, no. But I can give my personal opinion if you're interested in that. And that is that I don't believe, I used to, and I don't believe anymore that that it should be just completely universal to own a gun. And the reason for that is, when I did believe that, I was projecting my own agency and capacity and even personality type onto everybody else. And when I realized that not everybody else is the same level of agency, I think that it should be more like not an American thing, because like there are people who I think don't have the responsibility or the agency to own a gun. And, I'm not sure. There's licensing now. I think the licensing around handguns is very strict. The licensing about rifles is definitely there. I definitely think there has to be some licensing, even mental health checks, that sort of stuff. But I do think that on the other side, that if you're a responsible person and you can get checked out to be completely sound, you should be able to own a gun, because in the case that, I think every man has the right to defend his home. And one of the things that they always say is just call the police. It's like, but your gun can be in your hand in 20 seconds. The police are going to take 20 minutes. So, this is all just my personal values. It's my personal thoughts about this. If someone comes into your home in the middle of the night, you don't know what they're there for, and you don't know what they're capable of. You have every right to do whatever you feel is necessary to protect your family. And so, I do support people who can be checked out to be responsible, can be checked in with, can be licensed, and can be checked to be mentally sound and have a certain level of responsibility and demonstrate a certain level of responsibility and agency. Yes, absolutely, protect your family. However, if you can't pass some basic mental health checks, I'm not a fan of just like the American thing, like walking in and getting guns and wherever,
Well, with the US system, the US system has a lot of background checks, though. They do. There are background checks to get guns and stuff.
So that's fine. That's fine.
I think you've got to be careful when you say, people can, use guns for self-defense. I think the important part there is all the proportionality to the perceived risks of them.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that way you don't have people, going gung-ho when people come turn into their house at night. I'm sure you've heard last month, Police Commissioner Chris Dawson.
Someone's like dropping some junk in your mailbox, and then you're like, great, this is my opportunity to use my gun. No, you don't want that either. But on the other side, I think there was a story about a man in Queensland, a father who chased off a home intruder with an empty rifle, and the police showed up and took his rifle. That is absurd. And I think, that I commend him, okay, if it's empty, that shows a lot of agency to actually do the minimum thing possible to protect his family, and chase someone off with an empty rifle. That's actually fantastic, that it worked. And I'm glad he wasn't in the position of regretting that his rifle was empty. And I think that was the police response to that. If it's true, as I understand it, that they reprimanded him and took his rifle, I think that's absurd.
I'm sure you've heard that last month, Police Commissioner Chris Dawson in Western Australia released that map of where all the gun owners lived. And, he complained that there were 12 military-grade sniper rifles in the state, and that was just cause for, more gun control in Western Australia. And, of course, now he's going to be made the next governor of Western Australia. So what are your thoughts on something like that in terms of, were you looking to, I guess, going more towards the pre-John Howard system, or where do you think that would fall?
Sorry, what's the question? What?
So where would you draw? Where would you draw? Like, are you talking about going back to before John Howard, or are you talking about John Howard era controls? Like what sort of where would you draw that line? I guess when it comes to gun rights.
Yeah, I haven't spent a lot of time thinking about exactly what a gun policy would be until 30 seconds ago. So I'll just give you my general idea is that, we're a hierarchical species. There's a bell curve in all things, and some people have more agency, more emotional stability, and more responsibility, capacity for responsibility than others. And I would like to get all the facts before me and draw a line at some point. That's all. That's what I would investigate. So I'm not like no gun, and I'm not like everybody gets a gun. Just make sure that if people have problems that and it's obvious and you can see it coming, really common sense stuff that, okay, maybe that's a level of power you don't get to hold, because once again, you have to earn your sovereignty. If your ability goes down, what other people do to protect themselves from you will go up. But once again, if you can demonstrate your sovereignty, cool. What other people do to protect themselves is going to go down. That's the principle. Where the line is drawn, I don't have the facts. I'm just giving you my general idea about it.
Yeah.
And it's just my opinion too. That's not party policy. UAP has no policy on gun rights. That's just my personal opinion.
Now, you mentioned earlier talking about mining and protecting Australia's domestic mining industry. Would that tie in with the stance on energy for the UAP? And what is that policy on energy? Are you talking solar power or coal or nuclear? What would the approach of the UAP be on that? And would it be based on a domestic industry or more a free international market?
We have a policy to explore nuclear, and people want something carbon neutral, and nuclear will provide that, but they also want cheap and plentiful energy. One of the main objections people have is the possibility of nuclear going bad, and they point to Chernobyl or Fukushima. But the current technology seems to be SMRs, small modular reactors. They the plants that really sort of failed are built a long time ago, and as someone said, go drive a car that was made in the 50s. It's a piece of crap. It's a lot less safe than it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and so one of my volunteers actually works in energy, and he said that it's a little bit fake news to say that Chernobyl is uninhabitable now. He said that this is just what he told me anyway. I'd have to verify this, but he said that the level of radiation around Chernobyl, I'm not sure what degree, but he meant in the general city area, is less than if you fly frequently. And so that's a claim worth investigating anyway. But the point being, though, that small modular reactors these days are a lot more safe. They reuse the waste a lot. It goes a lot further down the chain. And so, and also to a lot of other countries are using nuclear at the moment and getting the benefits of that. So we do have a policy to go nuclear. I think solar panels and renewables, they're great at smaller scale, it seems. Like solar panels are great for your house, but you wouldn't want to rely on them to power your city. And so I think a whole suite of energy sources is going to be the optimum. You might have a nuclear reactor for the big stuff. There might be some place for coal and things like that. One of the things too that has been pointed out by Clive to us directly is that Australian coal is a lot cleaner. They can get coal from other places, which if they stop our coal exports, they'll get coal from other places, and the amount of pollution is actually higher with other types of coal. And Australian coal produces something like 3 or 4 times the energy output for the same amount of pollution. So if you actually inhibit Australian coal exports and mining, they'll resort to other places to get them, and consequently up the pollution 3 or 4 times. There's a lot of things. Also, the 15% export duty on our iron ore is going to incentivize domestic production of our minerals. So we want jobs, infrastructure created here, which is going to, once again, reduce emissions because you're not transporting it as much. So there's a lot of things we want to domestically, and that's also another official policy, is we want to domestically process our minerals. Why send things overseas for people to turn into products that we buy back to them? We should be doing that here. We should be going into that manufacturing here. If we're not transporting them as much, there's going to be less carbon footprint, and we're going to create that wealth and prosperity here for us. So I think anyone who's not ideologically possessed about the issue of energy is going to see that there's going to be a whole suite of energy sources. Nuclear is going to have a place. It can be safe, reliable these days with modern technology. If they've nailed the technology and it's all working really well, it's a fantastic solution. And there's going to be place for renewables as well. But I think generally it's on a smaller scale.
Yeah, some of the biggest advocates for the renewables sector admit that you need to have a backup system for your renewables. So a lot of the guys do talk about nuclear and the benefit of having a nuclear plant to back it up. So I think you're scaling spot on in terms of we should be using it in different places. Renewables in country towns can work because you've obviously got the space and you've got the less dense population, you can pull it off. But yeah, for the cities and stuff, I think, and backup nuclear, if we're serious about knocking carbon emissions down, then nuclear has to be on the table. We can't have this discussion without it, I don't think.
Look, and it's the same as like anything else I've been saying, just fix the problem. Get rid of the ideology, just fix the problem. You know, one thing, this is like my open letter to Greens voters. Are you against carbon or are you just against energy production in general? Because some people seem to have this idealization of a primitive state. Now, just to get a little bit philosophical, the French philosopher Rousseau said that inequality is inherent to having a civilization. You know, if you're all scratching around in the dirt for subsistence living, you're more equal. People are more equal. But as soon as you have a big, thriving modern society, people become more unequal. And some people are driven psychologically by a big need for equalization of status. And so one of the ways in which I think this expresses itself is they start, you know, romanticizing a primitive state where they're more equal. And so they don't like the idea of energy production in general, and they're kind of projecting onto that, you know what I mean? And so they have almost this religious idealization of attacking energy production at all. And I think when you're talking to somebody, it's useful to sort of figure out if they're that type of person. And if they're not that type of person, it just comes down to, great, well, let's just fix the problem. And yeah, as you said, if renewables can power a small town and it works, great, do it. People are happy, fantastic. If it's going to have dropouts like South Australia, put in a nuclear reactor. Give people that back out, because you can't have society grind to a halt if it's not working. If it works, do it. I'm happy.
I think that is probably the fact that I think you are right that it comes down to, you know, are you opposed to the carbon or energy production? Because a number of Greens voters we just see, some Labor, but mostly Greens, who just oppose anything, even geothermal, which again you don't even have the risk of Chernobyl or Fukushima there when it comes to geothermal. But the fact that they've just cut that off completely in Australia, we have the resources to do it domestically, is I think a big thing there. So are you thinking more of a free market for energy sources? People can, you know, pick and choose if they want renewables or hydro or coal, nuclear or geothermals, or would it be some sort of national structure to support nuclear power?
Well, we have a national policy to support nuclear. I couldn't tell you at what scale what's going to be the optimum. Yeah. You know, I'm sure we'll figure it out. But at the end of the day, it's just like if it works. You know, like obviously a free market's always the optimum, I think, is giving people that voluntary reciprocal choice. That's definitely where I'd start out for sure.
Yeah.
And, you know, like there's an incentive for people to look at solar panels. You know, I know people who have a battery and run most of their household energy off solar panels, and they're laughing all the way to the bank, you know. So if they're happy and it works, like, and there's that incentive, go for it. It's fantastic. But other people will want something more large scale and reliable. Cool. I'm sure people will figure it out. But once again, you know, to make a clear decision on where the line is for that, you know, you kind of need to have all the information, and I don't at the moment.
I think it's stupid that the people who are opposing all this industry live in cities where, you know, you can't even, like this, like Melbourne, Sydney Greens who are pushing this, you know, they can't even put in solar power because of how dense the population is there. They have to rely on regional areas producing that power, where they have no idea what the things like, or the things like on the ground in those areas where there is support for nuclear and geothermals.
One of the problems as people get wealthier, and especially as they live in cities, is they can start to afford luxury beliefs. and they remove themselves from empirical realities, and they can start just indulging, like I said, their luxury beliefs. And so, it's always good to throw a few things at people and find out where they're at and how empirical they're being, and there are people too who resort to this anti-human thing. Well, there's too many people on the planet anyway, let's worship throw a few things at people and say, okay, if the lights went out here because they're, is that acceptable to you? Always disambiguate who you're talking to and where they're coming from, because there are a lot of different things that can be happening. And and inner city luxury beliefs is one of the possibilities.
We've hit the 1 hour mark. I think it's a good place to wrap up on. So I guess my final question is, who do you think will win, and who do you want to win this election?
I think absolutely Craig Kelly would be a fantastic prime minister. And even if I wasn't running as a candidate, I would probably say the exact same thing. That's like, oh, for God's sake, let's just have a change. Let's change it up, try something new, because what we've got going on is so bad, and it's not going to get any better. Try change, a bit of change doesn't hurt. Mix it up. All I'll say too is people like to construct these images of like, oh, well, I'm the Prime Minister, I'm standing in front of the flag and I'm at Parliament House. But like they're just people. They're just people, and they don't have any inherent intelligence or ability that so many other people don't have. They don't have magical, they're saying, running this campaign now, can you trust people with no experience? It's like, there are people in UAP who have so much more financial business people experience, more than the established political parties. And they want to talk about experience. I'm telling you now, a lot of these people finish high school and they go into the Young Liberals or Young Labor supported groups. Even before they finish high school, they're groomed for a long time. One of the things that I had to do was renounce a British passport. I never even used it, but my dad was born in Scotland, and I had to cancel British citizenship because I got it from getting a British passport that I never used. And that was a race against time. And I was talking to one of the ladies in HQ, and I said, she said, it can take months. I only got this candidacy a few months ago. And I'm like, how do people do this? She's like, oh, well, if you're in one of these pre-established parties, they'll know a couple of years before who they're going to run. You know what I mean? And so you want to talk about experience. Do you want what experience exactly are they having? They're having experience being politicians. They're having experience ass kissing as a cog in a machine. That's the experience they've got. Not running business, not making money, not managing, people and families and all this sort of stuff. So don't let them tell you that they've got some experience. The experience that they've got, you don't want. So change it up, take a chance. It's literally not going to get any better, and it has the capacity to it's not going to get any worse. It's not going to get any better if you don't change it up. And if you do change it up, it won't get any worse, and it has the capacity to get a lot better. Because I'm telling you now, the people who are really passionate, smart, driven, high achievers don't spend their lives in these political machines. They don't know they're going to run as a candidate 2 years before. They're not being groomed to be politicians. So give it a shot. Do it.
The irony also is that democracy is supposed to be about representation of the people. So it's supposed to be by the people, for the people. That's that old saying. So basically, you're not supposed to be a professional politician. You're supposed to be someone from the community that's representing your people.
Yeah, so. And the latest pop star that Sony Music releases, they discovered her in a cafe, humming to herself while she pulled the A&R exec's coffee. And he just went for his morning coffee in New York, and this great, young Rihanna or whatever was just humming some tune, and he said, "Wow, I love that tune. I've never heard it before." And she's like, "Oh, it's my song. I I wrote it last night. And he's like, you know what? That little hum, I can make that a hit. And next thing you know, she's Britney Spears. Like, that's how things happen, right? Yeah, right. You know, no, that's not how it happens. The people just selected a candidate from the Labor Party, and they were just running a small business, and they just really wanted to represent the workers. Ironically, that's me. That's the UAP. Because we're all, non-politician small business owners who are just fed up, but not the majors. No, that's not. They're machines.
I think that's a perfect way to wrap it up. That's a brilliant finish to it. Thank you.
Thanks, boys.
Thank you.
Yeah, awesome.